we're going to start with the drawing of one. We've actually already done this a few times. The very inner membrane of a bacteria, because it is a cell, you should already know this. Cell membrane. Then I'm going to come in with the next level. We're thankful for this. This is something to be thankful for at Thanksgiving. Bacteria have a cell wall. Yay. This is how we kill them without accidentally killing our own cells when we take antibiotics. Pops them right here and all the juice pours out. And sometimes they have a layer of goo.
Not always, but sometimes. This is a
Capsule. Inside of it, you would find DNA. Not in a nucleus, it's a little circle of DNA. You should have little tinier circles. These ones are called
plasmids.
Sometimes bacteria have a tail. Sometimes they have many tails. Sometimes they have 2 tails or lots of tails. These tails are called flagella. Sometimes, or a lot of times, they're trying to make little bacteria babies. And they are not male or female, they just have a tube. And with that little tube, they just connect to another bacteria cell. Here's a picture. To exchange this DNA. These little tubes are called pili. And they don't even make new cells. They just exchange DNA. And when they're done, they're a little bit genetically different. That would be like you going to your partner, exchanging some DNA and walking away. You're just a little bit different. Your eye color is different and you have a different personality, and for the first time in your life you understand math, for example. From there they just clone themselves. There are 3 shapes of bacteria.
Oops, we forgot our ribosomes.
There are 3 shapes that bacteria come in. Sometimes they're shaped as a rod, kind of like these 2 L's in the word bacillus. E. coli is shaped as a rod. Sometimes they're shaped like a spiral. Spirilla. And sometimes they're shaped like a sphere, which is cocci. If it's a clump of spheres like this, it's called Staphylococcus. Staphylo means clump. Cocci is circles, so this is a clump of circles, which in fact it is. Strep throat is Streptococcus, and strep means chain, so it's a chain of bacteria. I just told you there's 2 ways that bacteria make little babies. There's no males, there's no females. So they either clone themselves, so there's always 2 types of reproduction, asexual and sexual. We did this with the paramecium. For sexual reproduction, which I'm skipping to this, it's they just exchange DNA through that tube. They don't actually make any new cells when they do this. They use the pili, that little tube. And this has a name, it's called conjugation. It sounds like what you do to a verb in Spanish. From there, they just start cloning themselves. Or they can skip that. They can skip the exchanging of DNA and just clone themselves. This would be like you making a couple million mini-yous overnight. This is just cloning. It's called binary fission. Our little friend, the paramecium, could do that as well. This is basically cloning. Asexual means that it's genetically identical to the parent. Sexual reproduction means the child or the offspring is not genetically identical to the parent. And then we've got this crazy timeline for like life on the planet. So I'm gonna have you draw this with me real quick. We've got, here's now, we've got rocks that we've radioactively dated that are as old as 4.6 billion years. They think that the universe itself might be 13 billion years. This is a stupid number, by the way.
I'm going to make this 4. 4 billion years. I'm going to split this in half. That would be 2 billion years ago. 4 billion years ago. I have trouble with 10 minutes. This would be 1 billion years ago. And this would be 3 billion years ago. And
if you look at this timeline of Earth, we've got fossils of bacteria, the first cells on the planet, prokaryotic cells, at 3.5 billion years ago. 3.5. That's a lot. That's a really, really long time ago. This is our first bacteria, unless we find fossils with even earlier bacteria. So far we have not. And then about 1.5 billion years ago, so I don't know, 2 billion years later, bacteria decided to start doing photosynthesis. So these are photosynthetic bacteria. Up until this point, there wasn't any oxygen on land. Like if you were to go to Earth, you know how you're going to build that time machine? When you set the time of when you want to go back, I wouldn't go back before this because there's no oxygen. You'll die. Bacteria are the reason you have oxygen. They started this whole thing. They started doing photosynthesis, and everything that has evolved since, because they're releasing O2 into the atmosphere, has needed that oxygen. So there's a bunch of bacteria, and they're still alive today. They're called anaerobic, and they cannot stand oxygen. They die in the presence of it. And those are the older ones that have been around before oxygen was a big gas in our atmosphere. But now oxygen is a big gas in our atmosphere. And I'm like, okay, well, when did humans start? Right here. No, they didn't. Actually, if I get down to it, right about 500 million years ago, we have our first multicellular life. So somewhere in here we went from still bacteria to a more complicated eukaryotic cell. And about 1/2 billion years ago, just so you know, that is the same as 500 million years ago. 500 million years ago is the same as 500 million. About that time, we get our very first multicellular life. There's something called a trilobite that was around at that time. We've got so many cool fossils of this life. Weird little like jellyfishy things and worm things and things with like little shells. About 250 million, or 1/4 billion years ago, we get multicellular life, fish, bony fish. We get reptiles, and then right about here we get big reptiles. So this is about when our dinosaurs started.
About 250 million years ago. Now we're not even using the word billion anymore. And dinosaurs ruled the earth. Let's see, this is 2.5. Let's say that too. That's one. To right about here.
And about 67 million years ago, not 200, this was 250. These numbers are a little bit off. Now 67 million years ago, dinosaurs went extinct, and they were already really struggling. And it's not all reptiles that went extinct, just the really big dinosaurs. There wasn't enough food, and a meteorite came down, and all the dust blocked out the sun for like a year. So our large dinosaurs, the fossils exist up to here, and then after that they're gone. Humans have been around, modern humans, Homo sapien, have only been around for about 200,000 years, so we really haven't been here very long.
Anyway, my point is that fossil evidence shows that bacteria date back to 3.5 billion years, and those are very simple cells. And we have really old fossils, and they are responsible for making the oxygen on the planet.
The bacteria that do that, cyanobacteria. Thank you, cyanobacteria, for making us our oxygen. Awesome. On the back, some interesting facts about bacteria. The DNA is 1,000 times longer than the actual cell that the DNA is housed in. So if you took this DNA and unwound it, it is 1,000 times longer than the bacteria cell itself. It can copy its entire DNA code in 20 minutes. So that really long strand of DNA, it can get doubled in 20 minutes. That's crazy. Those little tiny circles of DNA often have a little chunk that makes them that mutates and makes them resistant to our medicines that kill them. So there are resistant bacteria. They're resistant to our medicines, which are called antibiotics. Bacteria make their energy in their cell membrane. So weirdly, bacteria are the size of a mitochondria. Mitochondria make their energy in the membrane of the mitochondria. Bacteria make their energy in their cell membrane. Mitochondria weirdly have their very own DNA in a circle, your own mitochondria in your cells. Bacteria have their DNA in a circle. Most scientists think that these prokaryotic cells ended up becoming symbiotic relationship with our cells as an energy maker, and then those are today's mitochondria. And just recently, scientists at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo recovered bacteria from amber, which is fossilized tree sap, and it was 135 million years old, and they revived it. Like, they brought the bacteria back to life, which is absolutely insane, and they just did that a little while ago. Endospores. Some bacteria produce a little bomb shelter where they can survive some crazy stuff, fire,
really freezing temperature,
extreme drying. And as soon as conditions are good, they grow back into a normal bacteria cell, and they do that when conditions are good. Anthrax is a really good example of that.
Anthrax is a cell that has this little bomb shelter.
Here's my stuffed animal. Very, very difficult to kill this bacteria, which is why it's so dangerous. And we talked about the domains, archaea and regular bacteria. Regular bacteria are more common. Archaea live in crazy places, like hot, acidic places. These are called thermoacidophiles. Salty places, like the Salton Sea. These guys live in your intestines, and they make methane gas, which is flammable and stinky. They're called methanogens. Some are so crazy that they live in radioactive environments. There are bacteria crushing it in radioactive environments. That's crazy because that mutates DNA. And then these bacteria are the ones I was telling you about that can't stand oxygen. Aerobic means air, and that means no. So they don't like air. In fact, they die in the presence of oxygen.
They die when near oxygen.
Scientists think that they are more closely related to eukaryotic cells. That means that if you look at these archaea, they're more closely related than we are to regular bacteria. Regular bacteria, they are either heterotrophs, they eat, autotrophs that do photosynthesis, they make oxygen, and then there's another set of autotrophs, they make their own food. They do not use the sun though, they use chemicals, and they usually live at the bottom of the sea. So instead of photosynthesis, which would be using the sun, photosynthetic autotrophs, they use chemicals instead. These are bacteria that use chemosynthesis, which means to make from chemicals. Foods. We're going to do a food lab. We're going to look at foods made by bacteria. We're going to taste foods if you're okay with it. You don't have to. Basically, if you take something like milk from a cow, you get, there's a sugar inside of that milk called lactose. You may have heard of people being lactose intolerant. OSE means it is a sugar. Well, bacteria eat this. And as they eat it, they release a, I'm going to call it pee, bacteria pee. They release a chemical as they eat this sugar. And that chemical makes the food taste sour, or gives it kind of a tangy flavor, giving us rise to yogurt, which can be very tangy. Swiss cheese is made by bacteria. Sourdough bread, the reason it has kind of a tangy flavor is because of the bacteria. I have this bread, I have Swiss cheese, I have yogurt. Kimchi, if you like kimchi, it's very tangy. That's made with bacteria. Sauerkraut, cottage cheese, all sorts of different foods, and we're going to be trying some of these in class. So that is bacteria.